Yeah. Okay. Hitting that live button. It says we're live, so hopefully we're actually live. Those in the chat, let me know if you can hear me, if you can hear the background music, if you can hear Shifty. Shifty is joining us this week. How you doing, buddy?
What's good? I'm happy to be here again.
Yeah, man. It's always a pleasure to have you on. For those wondering, Brandon is busy with Halloween stuff, and I felt like changing the lighting today in the spirit of Halloween, I guess. So
it works.
Yeah. Or I don't know. I'm just kind of like, the red just reminds me of the MEI, and I love Metroid. So that's it for that. But anyways, for those curious, this is a Nintendo podcast we do usually every Sunday night, and this time we're gonna be talking about Nintendo Switch Online, the future of it, the expansion pack that came out this week, our impressions of it, our impressions of the emulation. Is the controversy and the backlash really warranted? Are we going to discuss that? We're going to kind of go into all of that. I mean, we're also going to kind of talk a little bit about Mario Party Superstars that came out. I got to play it. Shifty, you were telling me you got to play it as well, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that. And because we're going to be talking about Nintendo 64 games and Sega Genesis games because of Nintendo Switch Online and the expansion pack, I feel like this is going to eventually lead into discussion on remakes. So I figured, you know what, it's been a semi-slow news week. Let's also throw in this topic here where we can kind of talk about some remakes we'd like to see from Nintendo someday. So that's the kind of plan for the evening, and I think it's gonna be a good little time we're gonna have. But you know, before we jump into things, Shifty, how are things? Anything new with you and your channel?
I actually just uploaded a video today, kind of just giving my thoughts on Superstars, kind of how I feel about it. The fact that I feel like the game just kind of caters to my specific form of nostalgia for Mario Party. So I like to think that I'm very biased when I think about this particular game.
Yeah, you may be a bigger Mario Party fan than me. I technically haven't bought Mario Party Superstars, but I did play it for a few hours over the weekend, and it was kind of like the ideal Mario Party experience. Group of friends. There was screaming, there was anger, there was angst and surprise and joy. It was all there. So I feel like I got, like, you know, I played a few of the maps. I got a good feel of some of the mini games. So I definitely got like at least some good impressions of the Mario Party Superstars experience. So I think I can definitely share in something there. I'll tell you that, you know, when I have loved Mario Party, like Mario Party Superstars was that. Yeah, I think they kind of did it. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Let's first kind of check on the chat here. Vooper, good evening. Birdman Senpai, hello. DE Fox, I'm okay. Let's see. There's nothing quite like fighting Ganon at 1080p with the Series X controller. Interesting. I see you're emulating it. Okay. Elvin R, hello there. Ronnie Fazio, good evening. Seahawks 24 Rule, happy Halloween. Yellow Kazoo, hello. Super Chris, boo. Oh, I'm frightened.
Ah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Are you an Emmy? Who else but Zane? Hello. Robeer, what is good? Danny, hi, first time catching this live because it's 2 a.m. in Europe. I feel you there. Who else but Zane says, I don't deny that there's probably input lag on N64, but I feel like that video of Link doing a backflip like half a second late is misleading. It's nowhere near that bad. You know, I don't want to dive fully.
Get into it.
We're gonna get it. We're gonna. That's like the big topic. Right. We're gonna dive into that soon. I'm just gonna say this. I like to say this a lot. I really buy into this philosophy. The truth is often somewhere in the middle. But we'll get to things. Amber Abalama. And I'll just restart live stream on Halloween. Sweet. I'm glad you appreciate it. Yeah, I don't really have any plans for Halloween specifically. So, you know, I don't have a costume of any kind, so I'm just kind of... I actually just had my birthday this weekend, and I am old. So, I don't think people are going to want an old man. No, I'm not, obviously not an old man, but I'm just not gonna collect. I'm just not gonna play with 6-year-old kids getting candy. Not by myself, at least. On a Sunday night. I didn't even know it was your birthday. I didn't really advertise it.
Oh well.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm older now. Yeah.
That's alright. I'll be older in like 2 months, so I'll be there with you in a bit.
Will you advertise yours?
I don't know. It's on my Twitter, so I mean, anyone who takes a glance will be able to know.
Noted. Noted. Joycey J. Whoa, man, what's all the booze, man? You guys are freaking me out here. Skip It Production, hello. Paco Salvador, hello there. Steve West, anyone try the N64 NSO controller cross Genesis, SNES, or NES apps on the service? I have not picked up that controller, so I can't really speak for that, unfortunately. Did you pick up the N64 online controller?
No, I just felt like there wasn't enough use for it for me, anyways. I mean, I know it works, but I feel like it's the kind of thing that would be a collector's item where I wouldn't use it that often.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm just playing with my Pro Controller. It's fine. Like, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get you.
And I know people have kind of complained about the controls, but it's kind of felt natural for me. But that may have to do with the fact that I played a lot of Wii U Virtual Console games. But we'll get to it. Joy CJ, Halloween adulting, getting candy on November 1st for 90% off. Now that's intelligent right there. Yeah. iSonic, hello. Let's see. Elvinar, happy belated birthday, Andres. Thank you very much. Super Chris, your birthday's next Sunday. All right. Well, let's keep that in mind, Chris. Well, hopefully happy birthday in advance. Anyway, let's jump into things. So, I feel like the big topic is our impressions of Nintendo Switch Online's expansion pack. And recently, it came to light that Nintendo's video that they upload onto YouTube for the expansion pack is now their most disliked video ever. And that is suggestive of the backlash and vitriol and angst and just general displeasure of how Nintendo's handling this service and its pricing, and what we're hearing about a lot of people's impressions of the expansion pack, of the emulation, of Nintendo 64 emulation and Genesis emulation. I got it. I picked it up. I did not, I'll just be frank, I think the $50 does kind of feel like a hard pill to swallow, especially because there isn't even like a monthly price to pay. Like, you have to just buy the whole year. And that's a little strange. You normally don't do that. Normally what they do is that there's a monthly service that you know, when you pay month by month, right? And when you do that, you actually have to spend more money. So, you know, normally what they do is they'll have an annual price. If you just pay it all up front, you get a better deal. They just bypass that and just buy it for a whole year. Like, they just want that $50. So that's a hard pill to swallow when Nintendo Switch Online, if you're just doing it for individual members, is $20. That's more than double the price. And there's a certainly a debate in terms of the value there, right? Because for the base package of $20 a year, you get the option to play games online. You get cloud saves. You get and the NES app, the SNES app, and different deals and things of that nature, the ability to play certain games like Tetris 99 and such. So that's kind of like what you get for the $20 a year, which people complain about Nintendo's online service, but for $20 a year, it's not that expensive and there is something there, right? But then when you more than double it, just to add a few more old games to play, and DLC for just Animal Crossing New Horizons, it's just one of those things where it just doesn't appeal to as large of an audience, and it's more than double the price. So that's I feel like that's definitely, you know, a lot for a lot of people. But even as someone like me who's a hardcore Nintendo fan, I'm sure some people will accuse me of being a shill, but like, I mean, I bought the service. I bought the service this week, and I didn't spend $50 on it. No. I spent $80 on it. I spent more money on it. But actually, because it's something that Nintendo does that... I'm about to say something that's complimentary of Nintendo, so, you know, don't attack me here, but I actually think it's smart that Nintendo has this family plan. If you have friends or family that are willing to split the cost, even if you just get one person, it's already cheaper than the $50. So you can have up to 8 people with the family plan, and you get all the features. There's no limitations of being on the family plan. You just can invite 8 people. So if you even invite one person, that 80 is now split into 40, and it's cheaper than the individual plan. You get 4 people, then it's $20. And, you know, if you get 8 people, it's $10. And at that point, that's pretty cheap, right? So if you can take advantage of the family plan, I feel like the pricing is actually pretty good. And that's kind of a unique thing that we don't see other companies really do, have like a family service like that, right? Like typically other streaming services or things like that, they might just allow you to use your logins from a few different accounts, but it's not like just actually designed for, hey, you can get multiple people to bunch in together and you could all kind of split the cost, right? So I think that's something that should be considered as well. Like, it's not just straight up, you have to spend $50. That's the only option. No, if you get some people involved, even just one person, all of a sudden it's $40 or less. So there's that to consider there. And that's what I did. I got the family plan. I split it with one person already, and if anyone else jumps in, well, you know, they'll pitch in 10, and then that price kind of gets lower and lower, right? So the blow hasn't been as hard. But still, you know, I had some hesitance even as a hardcore Nintendo fan and a hardcore Nintendo 64 fan. So I feel like the fact that me, a hardcore Nintendo fan, whose first system wasn't 64, so the nostalgia for me is incredibly strong with that particular system, that inclusion, I was hesitant, then I feel like that definitely is a sign that, yeah, Nintendo picked a very high pricing. And I don't know if they're gonna drop it, but if they don't drop, then it's kind of on them to, I guess, really show its value to the public, because right now it's not doing too good. And we can get into that, but Shifty, how about you give me kind of your impressions of just the situation regarding the features of this expansion?
Yeah, I would say, for the most part, I just agree with you. I think it's
You disagree?
No, I agree.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying I agree, because I feel that, the problem, right, is now that it's $50, right, you end up kind of having to compare it, right, to other services and whatnot.
For $60, you can get a year's worth of PSN, for example.
Yeah. And with that, you're getting, free games every month, and these games are a lot more recent than, say, like PlayStation 1 games, for instance. Yeah.
I remember I got PSN. I mean, for PSN, I kind of get it randomly. I usually don't even get it for a whole year. I just get it for a few months at a time, depending on if I'm playing something. But for example, that's how I was able to get Bloodborne, because it was one of the free games at that time, and Bloodborne's one of my favorite games ever. Bloodborne's one of the best PlayStation exclusives that came out during the PS4 era, as opposed to Nintendo's offerings of Mario Kart 64 or Donkey Kong Country, which are great games, but they're also decades old.
Right, and a lot of us, especially people like yourself and me, where we kind of grew up with the N64, we've played these games like a ton of times. Like we've played them a lot to the point where, I mean, there's always going to be people who haven't played them. Like I think a really good addition, I think their best addition to the service was Sin and Punishment, uh, just based on the idea that that game just never came to the West before this point.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I think it's just hard to argue. Like, okay, you go from $20 to 50. That means you're gonna have to offer us. If you want more than double the money for it, you kind of have to offer people more than double the value, right? And it just doesn't feel like that's the case. It just, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I love the N64. I like a lot of games on Sega Genesis. Like, I would love to play Streets of Rage and whatnot, but it just does not feel like we are getting more than double the value. Now, you did bring up the family plan, and I think that is the best way of going about it if you are going to, you know, jump into this like expansion pass. And I do the same thing, mind you. Like I have a family plan, and there's 8 of us. There's 8 people in that family plan, and we're all, you know, splitting it. So it makes the the service that much more easy to swallow because of the family plan. So it is.
I mean,
that
for
is
$10 a month, I would say that's actually a really, really great deal, right? But there's a hurdle of having to get 8 people to communicate and work together. Because the other thing is that, sure, maybe you ought to do it now, but what happens a year from now where the one person who's the head of the account then has to ask for people to pay up, you know? Like, that's where things get a little messy.
Yeah, I mean, if you have like it's tricky, and it's something that's not really technically available to like everyone, right? Like it's not an option that everyone can do. Not everyone has 7 other friends and family that could split this cost. So it's difficult. Like it's a good thing, it's a positive thing, but it's not a option that I guess everyone would have.
You know what I would have kind of liked? Like, what if they had an integrated way to do it on, like, the Switch eShop, right? Where each person who signs up for a family plan actually has to put in their own card information. And they just pay for their share, right? And what happens is, say a year from now, you have 8 people, right? Let's say a year from now, 4 of them decide not to continue paying the second year. So they drop out, and what happens then, you get a notification, and then your shared price is 20. Like, why can't they do that? You know, just because, sure, you can communicate on your own, but, you know, if it's just sort of integrated in there where people can each pay separately through the system, I'm just saying, like, it's just cutting out kind of like the legwork of you doing it yourself. That I guess from Nintendo's perspective is like, why even bother to design all that if you can just rely on people to just do it themselves? You know, the same way they rely on people to handle voice chat, really, because we're not gonna. The app is terrible. So
yeah, it's awful.
Yeah, but you know the pricing.
The pricing just makes it hard to swallow because I don't think they would be. I mean, we could also get into the whole talk of like how well the emulation is, but other than that issue, right? The price is also the other main issue, I would say.
Yeah.
If it wasn't 50, let's say, because we got like what NES and Super Nintendo with the $20 version, and then the expansion pass is like an extra $30 for N64 and Sega Genesis. If it was at most, I feel like it should have been 40, because there's another 2 consoles being added to the mix.
Yeah, I
think they're overvaluing the Nintendo 64 specifically because it's the only 3D console that's on there. And Sega Genesis.
I do feel like there's more demand for N64 than the others, though.
I mean, yeah.
And that's probably why I think they can get away with it.
I mean, they get away with it because, like, of people like us.
Yeah. And again, if you do the family plan, this is a great deal. But the problem is that the family plan is there's a bit of a hurdle there. So what people see is just the $50 for one. Like, that's kind of like the figurehead of this issue. Like, it's the frontal pricing that people see, that people notice. They're like, oh, $50 for this, you know. So that's led to a lot of backlash.
And
Yeah.
something I also wanted to bring up is because I've seen some people say like they feel like it's worth it if you're specifically a fan of Animal Crossing because of the expansion. And here's the thing, on that kind of works, but the issue is if you happen to be someone who doesn't play Animal Crossing, that's for one, and two, if this is going to be a yearly thing where people are going to be spending $50 per year, what's going to be the incentive after this year then? Like, is there going to be another expansion next year that's going to be covered by this expansion pass?
There's no guarantee of that. Like, I wish they would have said more things are coming beyond this. Like, we kind of know that there are, but it would have been nice if Nintendo had even gone as far as to say, hey, look, we know they're gonna add more N64 games. We know they're gonna add more Sega Genesis games. We don't know if they're gonna add more free DLC. I've seen some people bring up the argument that maybe they should drop the Animal Crossing DLC so it would be cheaper. The thing is, I believe, and Shifty, I think you agree with me here. There's a lot of people that tend to agree on this issue. The Animal Crossing DLC wasn't a part of the package to make it more expensive. It was actually added to it to make it seem more inviting. Like, in other words, if the Animal Crossing DLC didn't happen, this would still be this price. And I think they put that in there to make it more inviting, and it is in a way. Like, for the first year, you know, if you plan on getting the Animal Crossing DLC, which I think is what, $25, like that's already kind of worth the price jump from the Nintendo Online you already have for $20. So, you know, it kind of makes sense if you look at it that way. Then all of a sudden, Sega Genesis and N64 Online for $5, that's an amazing deal, sure. But to your point, this is a subscription service. This is going to continue coming. That price you're going to get charged out every year if you can maintain it. So what's coming beyond that? Now, if we had a guarantee that DLC for big Nintendo games would just be given to us for free on this service moving forward, then I'd be like, okay, that's something, right? Or if they do something like what Sony does, where they offer up one Nintendo game available for download per month, like they pick one, you know. It doesn't have to be like Sony doesn't have every single one of their big games available for PlayStation Network owners or users, the entire library all at once. No, it's one or two games per month, and they cycle out. So if you missed your chance, you can't go back. So that way, you know, they're not like, I guess, depreciating the value of their software significantly by doing that. They still are. If you look at the pricing for like PlayStation games versus Nintendo, there's a significant difference there. But maybe Nintendo could consider something like that. You know what I mean?
One thing I particularly thought of is that I remember there being a promotion that Nintendo pulled a while ago. I don't remember which console it was. I want to say it was the Wii U, where they gave. Or was it a Switch? I'm not entirely sure. But there was a promotion they did at one point where you essentially bought vouchers.
That was for Switch.
And what if they did that? What if they gave us a sort of like, maybe there's not a big expansion releasing the year after, but maybe they can provide people with the expansion pass a $20 voucher. That would have essentially
like discounts for DLC,
right? Or maybe it could even be discounts for anything in the store. It could just be a $20 voucher.
Well, that's what I thought the initial Nintendo Online would be. You know, so not really. You can get you have access to like the Nintendo store where you can get like certain things, like the controllers and stuff, I guess. So there's that. But I guess because that's mostly physical items from the store, there is room for them to just add eShop deals. Like they could just call it eShop deals, you know? And I'm for that. Like, what if it just means like a blanket 10% discount off everything on the eShop? That adds more value, you know? I'm down for that, you know? And if more free DLC is added, I saw some people bring up Age of Calamity DLC in the chat. Like, if they threw that in for free, I think that would work, you know? I don't think they'll do that because Konami's developing that, so there's that issue. I think a week or two ago I was suggesting Monster Hunter Rise, and I would love that, but that's also developed by Capcom. I think this DLC has to be from 4 games that are specifically entirely developed by Nintendo. Hence Animal Crossing New Horizons, that's an internal EPD group team that made that game. It's also one of the best selling games out there. Like, they did this because they could do this for this game. Like, this game doesn't need more money, you know? They knew that throwing that DLC in there would help the package overall.
Right. I just feel like they, even if they don't have some kind of big expansion coming out for another game, they could at the very least offer some kind of $20 voucher that you can use to get a game off the eShop, or make it a discount of some kind.
Like you just mean like every year you get a $20 voucher?
Yeah, or maybe not necessarily every single year, but maybe if they don't have an expansion they could give you. But I would imagine that if they want to match the value that the expansion pass gave, I would imagine it to be about $20 to $25. Because again, like you said, we don't know for sure if some kind of expansion / DLC is guaranteed in any way. We don't know that.
Yeah.
And if they do if next year has absolutely nothing like that, the next year people are literally going to be paying $50 for just N64 and Genesis.
Well, think of it like this. So remember when Tetris 99 came out? That was fairly early on into the life of Nintendo Switch Online. You were thinking, oh, are we going to see more Tetris 99 things? And we have, but they're just kind of like the 99 style things. There isn't like a whole bunch of new games that are for Nintendo Switch Online, or that are free for Switch Online owners. There are a few. I'm not saying there aren't any, but they're not as prevalent as we were kind of hoping when they first introduced the idea. So there's that fear, right? We look at how Nintendo's handled things already. Have they really done enough to make us feel confident that they're gonna continue that in a better way, right? So that's kind of an uphill battle for Nintendo.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult because people already don't like the price tag as it is.
Yeah.
And then we haven't even touched the emulation itself.
We haven't touched it.
Yeah, and that is a whole other can of worms that
Yeah, we're going to touch on it. There'll be some conversation on that for sure. Where are we right now? But let me just check in with the chat real quick, cuz I know once we jump into the emulation stuff, like that might even be a longer section. So
right.
Let me just kind of check in the chat here. A lot of you guys are chatting. Thank you for chatting. Leave a like. Check out Shifty's channel. He just put out a video, by the way, so make sure to check that out, guys. His channel is linked in the description below. Let's see here. I'm gonna just focus on some ads. Ronnie Fazio, I agree with both of you. I personally didn't upgrade because the price was just too much of a jump for just N64 and Sega Genesis games that Sega's constantly released. Rest in peace, Banjo. I mean, Banjo is coming though, so...
He is coming, although emulation is up in the air, I will say, if you are strictly a Nintendo fan, then it's gonna be... We would just have to hope the emulation is stable.
Get the family plan going. Yeah. Maybe I could even put like a Discord category in my Discord for people who want to organize like a family plan thing, if you guys want to do that. Yeah, I understand. $50 for Banjo is a lot.
It's very steep. The funny thing is too is that I know it's not Nintendo related, but on the Xbox side of things, they sold Rare Replay, which had Banjo and a bunch of other stuff, for $40. Like that, it by itself is cheaper than this online service.
Yeah. So the interesting thing though, I'll get. There's a couple more questions. I'll get to that, and then I'll say what I was gonna say. I'm the Sean Kilcar. I'm streaming Ocarina of Time with Project 64. I don't want $50 a year. Well, there is that. A lot of people have said they'll just emulate it, which it's kind of a gray area. I will not endorse or condone, but also I will not chastise or judge you. I think technically what people say is that if you own the game, you're allowed to emulate it on PC. But I've heard a lot of people talk about that though. A lot of people have said that. Heck, I've seen a lot of people on social media just suggest that they'll just pirate every Nintendo game. Like, I've seen a lot of sort of toxic, sort of hateful things said towards Nintendo because of this situation in general. Like, it's been a little dark looking at social media lately in regards to that. I'm not implying anyone here, is like that. I'm just simply saying that there's been a lot of sort of screw it. I don't care. I'm just gonna do what I want legally. I don't care. I'm not gonna give money, Nintendo, any sort of money to Nintendo, right? Like that has been said. I've seen that said a lot. You know, and I don't think that's right, but at the same time, it's clear that a lot of people are displeased with how Nintendo's handling this.
Right.
Christopher Mendez. Luigi's Mansion 3 had a DLC that adds multiplayer party games. That would be a good addition. Yeah, I mean, you know, like if Luigi's Mansion 3 DLC, which has already been out for a little while, was all of a sudden made free, that'd be a nice little thing to do, you know? So if they were to go back to some old DLC packs and make those free, yeah, I mean, if you don't want to have the new ones, like that still adds something. So there is certainly value there, for sure.
Yeah.
Charles Stradell. What I prefer is people not paying for an overexpensive service, but also not pirating stuff instead of paying for new indie games. That could be good. You're suggesting people should just like try out new indie games? Yeah, there's a lot of really good indie games.
Yeah, a lot of them inspired by like older classics as well.
Right, I think that's kind of like the point for sure. Yeah. There's a lot of good indie games. I was actually just playing last night. Is it an indie game? I don't know. Abzu?
Abzu. I think it is. I'm not entirely sure though. I'm not familiar with like the development team.
But I also started playing Unravel 2 as well. So I'm pretty sure that's an indie game. That's beautiful. It's awesome. So, you know, and that's only like $4 right now on the eShop, by the way. It's a great deal.
Yeah.
90% off. Flippin'. I just wish Nintendo would make the online for Switch games better. Give us voice chat on Switch, online messaging, and many more. I'll say this. People have been complimentary of Mario Party Superstars online. And I'm not saying it has like great voice chat options and things like that, but it is well running. And a lot of that has to do with Nintendo revamping their servers earlier in the year. They first tested this out with Monster Hunter Rise, and people remarked back then how Monster Hunter Rise has like way better online than most other Switch games. So Nintendo has made strides with their online, at least in terms of like their servers and things connecting better. So there has been progress. Now, will they ever have proper messaging and voice chatting and an invite system that works similar to Xbox Live? I don't know. But, I mean, well, I think someday, but I don't know when.
Yeah. I think it's something that will happen eventually. I just don't...
Yeah.
Like, Nintendo is kind of hard to track down as the one they want to, like, do anything that the others companies are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. But, let's jump into this emulation part of the issue. So, the pricing, you know, is tough. By the way, Whooper, yes, we should absolutely play snipper clips. Great idea. But, yeah, the emulation, I was seeing things being said, and I didn't even really believe it. Like, I thought that people might have been exaggerative or complaining or maybe even doctoring some stuff. And I've actually been playing through Ocarina of Time trying to get to the water temple, because apparently there are some glaring issues in the water temple specifically. But I'll tell you this. I've been playing N64 online, Sega Genesis online, and honestly, like just being full honest, I'm okay with it. Like, do I think that this is the best executed, best sort of offering Nintendo has ever provided? No. But do I like what I have? Am I enjoying the games? Yes. Do I feel like it's broken? No. Are there things that I wish were better? Yes. But I'm not like in a position where I feel like I want a refund. I don't feel like the service is broken. I think when you see a lot of the complaints, a lot of things that people are putting out there, I think they are. I'm not saying that there isn't truth to it, because there is. I have seen some visual issues with Ocarina of Time, for example. I can't confirm that. But am I still enjoying the game? Yes. Does it still look pretty? Prettier than the initial release? Yes, but with some occasional graphical issues. But I guess my point is that, like, it's not broken. There are just some issues that I think hopefully they patch. But it hasn't, like, ruined my experience at all. I actually kind of like the service. Like, I've been playing a lot more N64 and Sega Genesis than I've ever played NES and SNES on my Switch. Put it that way. So, you know, even though it's more expensive and there are issues that need to be resolved, I'm enjoying it more than the base package of NES and SNES. So I'll say that just to start things off, but we'll get into the details in a bit. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, considering I grew up with the N64, it's definitely like the most played one on my end too. Sega Genesis specifically on that end, I am a big Castlevania fan, so I'm really happy to see Bloodlines on there. But I also already own Bloodlines through the Castlevania collection they released like not too long ago.
Right.
And so because of that, the Sega Genesis mostly I'm using it for Streets of Rage, which I think that's probably one of the best games you could play online. Just because of the way the game is, it's just a game that I feel is just a lot more fun with more people. But with the N64 specifically, it's that's the only one really that has some kind of issues, right? Because the Sega Genesis emulation has been, like, I want to say practically perfected for a long time now. I think M2 is the company that typically works with Sega. I don't know if they're the ones that did this. They probably were. But the N64 one is rough. It's not broken. Like, I haven't had situations where the game just outright didn't work, or, you know, it just crashed repeatedly.
Yeah, I feel like I don't think janky would be an appropriate description. Like, it's not like I don't feel like there's performance issues. I think they're just graphical glitches for some of the games. I actually I played Mario Kart 64, noticed no issues at all. I played Dr. Mario, noticed no issues. I played Winback, I didn't notice any issues. I mean, the one I've noticed most of the issues from is Ocarina of Time, which is kind of like the big exciting one. That's kind of like the one that Nintendo showed off first, which is surprisingly, it's the one that seems to have the most kind of issues. And a lot of people sort of pointing out, like, the fog and stuff. But I've noticed, like, I think some of it comes down to because the resolution is a lot sharper. So actually, the image quality is better. Like, games look better on N64 Online than their original version, just for the record. Like, if there was any debate there, like, they are clearly better. You put them side by side, there is a clear difference. The resolution upscaling makes the games look nicer. But for some of them, it also makes certain issues more clear. And in some cases, like Ocarina of Time, it somehow has created more problems. Like, so people have been, there's been this fog issue. And I haven't gone to the water temple yet. I'm finishing up with the forest temple, actually. So I'm right there. I could skip the fire temple, go to the water temple if I really want to. But I noticed early on, the beginning of the game, Kokiri Forest, like the village, actually, I think looks really pretty. But you'll notice that you can see the Deku Tree off in the background very, very clearly. More clearly than ever before. That's because the fog is kind of gone. You can, like, see the canopy of the Deku Tree, but you're not supposed to see the Deku Tree in that way. So, like, when there's fog, you can just kind of see that there's some sort of big tree back, off in the distance, like a giant tree. But with the fog gone, you can see the leaves very clearly, and it's kind of just like a pixelated green blob. So, there is, like, you see it clearly now, but by seeing it clearly, there is, like, you can it's not how it was intended to be seen, so it looks a little off.
Right. Yeah. And to be, like, perfectly clear, the majority of the issues aren't necessarily tied to the actual gameplay, right? Like, most of it, maybe I could think of maybe one or two instances where it's been gameplay related, but most of it is usually because of, like, the effects just not working the way they are intended to work, textures just looking off.
I noticed
usually, like, on the visual side.
In Jabu Jabu's belly, when I was carrying Princess Ruto, her shadow and my shadow when I was on the rising platform were sort of like flickering, which was disengaging. Like I was like, why is that happening, right? So that's bad. That's bad because it takes away from your immersion. You know, anything like I like if you're watching a movie, okay, and you ever have to question why they did that, like in, you know, it takes away from your experience. Like you have to question, like, why do you say that in that way, or why did she do that in that way? That's bad acting, because you're no longer thinking about the story. You lose your immersion, right? So if you're playing a game and you're like, what's going on here? What's wrong with my game? That's bad. That takes away from your immersion. It takes away from you, you know, ingratiating yourself into the experience and buying into it, like, you know, kind of believing that reality for a little bit, right? So the Seeing That Shadow thing did that. So I would say that that's a bad little glitch there. It only lasted for 3 or 4 seconds while I was on a rising platform, and then it sort of normalized when I was traversing the rest of the dungeon, but it was still there. And this isn't the first time I've noticed some sort of weird little glitch like that.
Right. And also, like, to add on top of what you talk about like being taken out of the game, essentially, there's a lot of things that a lot of different people see or feel about like their favorite games that could take them out, that doesn't even necessarily have to do with, you know, visual bugs of any kind.
Yeah.
Like someone brought up in the chat, and I think it's a good example because I feel the same way, where they felt that the bottom of the well on Ocarina of Time is better in the Nintendo 64 version than it is on the 3DS remake that we got. And I actually agree in that end, where the 3DS version of Ocarina of Time, while it had a lot of quality of life improvements, because of certain tones were lost, I feel, in the translation to the 3DS, I wasn't as immersed, essentially, as I was with the original version of the game.
Ocarina of Time as a whole, the original N64 release, has a darker feel to it because the designs are darker. Like, they're more... It seems like it's trying to be more on the realistic side, right? With the remake, they did sort of tunify it a little bit, make it feel more... I don't want to say kiddie, but like...
I want to say, like, almost like the game has a more optimistic tone.
Right. Yeah, it's they chose more brighter colors for some of the texture redesigns and some of the character models. But Majora's Mask is dark, right? But Ocarina of Time is also dark. Like, there's a lot of dark things in there.
Right.
There are bright and pretty things in Ocarina of Time, but there's also a lot of things that are very sort of dark and gruesome, and it implies explicit things, and there's a darkness to it, and I think that's part of the charm of Ocarina of Time, right?
Right.
So some of that is lost in the remake. I actually absolutely agree with that.
I also think that the best way of, I guess, looking at Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time, in my personal view, is that Majora's Mask is a game that is designed to be dark the entire way through, while Ocarina of Time is designed for you to see the tonal shift between the 7-year gap. So you'll see, like, the more darker stories, the more darker horrors, most of that after that 7-year gap, while before that, it's more like childlike wonderment. Before that happens.
So it's really cool, right? The beginning of the game, the Kokiri Forest and Village, like, that is sort of like, it's like really pretty, right? You see like a lot of like the golden little lights flying around, the green, it's all very vibrant and lush. And then when you come in as an adult, it's foggy and there's just like these poisonous plants everywhere and they're trying to eat you. And it's a big contrast, right? Like what happened there. Or like obviously Castletown. It was this hustling, bustling, colorful town filled with music and people playing around and joking and dancing and being in love. And then you come in as an adult and it's all a barren wasteland. You hear like, you know, like the wind and everything's broken and burned, and there are these evil zombies that rape you to death. Like they jump on you and just like, you know, suck your soul out or something. Like it's just very disturbing. Like there's a huge sort of like difference there, right? So yeah, I totally agree with you. Like that, the Ocarina of Time does that a lot, and it's cool. But when they make certain parts of it feel more cutesy's the wrong word, but you know, there's less of a stark contrast of that tone.
Right.
It does take away from that for sure. So it's kind of nice playing through the original version in HD, Like, it is a cleaner, nicer looking version than the original, but something about the emulation has created a number of issues. I brought up the shadow thing, brought up the fog thing. I've even noticed the, and just for the record, like, I'm bringing up all these little issues. My overall experience of Ocarina of Time is still pretty much there. Like, I'm actually really enjoying the game still. Like, I'm not, it still feels fine to me. Like, I'm enjoying playing on my Pro Controller. I'm enjoying the rumble, and I'm enjoying the clearer picture. There's a lot of parts of the game that I feel look really nice, but there's also other parts that I'm like, that's not supposed to look like that. Like, a lot of the background things, like, for example, when you're a kid and you see, when you go towards Hyrule Castle, you look back at the town, you kind of see like a white outline of the silhouette of the town in the background, and that's, you're not supposed to see that. And in reverse, when you're looking at the castle, it almost looks rounder than it should be, which is also weird. So there are like some of these like little graphical issues like that. I am surprised that there's this many. Still, overall, I'm enjoying the game, but it's clear that then there actually needs to be some more work done with the Ocarina of Time version. Right. There are some graphical issues. Like, when I was approaching the castle, I literally saw parts of the map that were like see-through. Like, you know, sometimes, like, let's say there's a wall on the floor and you see a gap between the wall and the floor and there's just nothingness through it. I saw that a couple times. That takes away from your immersion. That's like, the world's not seamless here. There's something going on. So there's a number of little issues like that, and I don't doubt the water temple thing now. So, you know, it's unfortunate. I do hope that they patch it, because Ocarina of Time is like a big deal, you know? It should be fixed. But all the other games I played, I haven't noticed any issues, really. Like, it's just Ocarina of Time that seems to be kind of like the main one that's not really been treated well here. Have you noticed anything else, or is it just Ocarina of Time that seems to have the bulk of the graphical little issues?
I mean, it's definitely mostly Ocarina of Time. I will also add that Mario Kart 64 Ghost Data just doesn't work, like, at all.
I didn't get to that part, so okay.
Yeah, so typically Mario Kart 64, you need a memory pack on the original version of the game to be able to do that. But the I guess the emulator or whatever the emulation, when the game checks for a memory pack, you're clearly not on an actual N64 with a memory pack attached, so the game just does not let you play with the ghost data or anything. So that feature from the game just does not exist on the online service.
Huh.
Yeah. Wow. So if anything, I would say, like, if they're gonna patch any of these games and update them or whatever, that I would say that's pretty important, because that's a whole feature of a game just not available to you.
That's a big deal. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's surprising actually that they did this, and I guess I'm trying to figure out why, because Nintendo doesn't do this with their games. Their games are always well polished. They make sure they spend extra time in the oven. Just like sometimes they delay their games just so they can be as polished as possible. This kind of goes against that. And I guess what I'm sort of like speculating is that it's because these games have been done for years, right? So this isn't like a dedicated developer that puts, you know, quality games together, right? That's you know, being governed by Nintendo development philosophies. This is, I don't know who put it together, but not that. And they're like, hey, this is Nintendo Online. We need to do this. Let's put, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's like a different department that kind of like put this together that isn't like the typical sort of like studio from Nintendo that puts together a high quality game and makes sure it has polish by the time it goes gold, you know? Like, I wonder if that's kind of why this has happened. Because it's like not typical for Nintendo, you know what I mean?
Right. Honestly, it could. I'm not entirely sure myself, because I feel like this goes into finding out who's making decisions within the company, and I don't think that's something that we will ever really know. Yeah. But it could definitely just be something along the lines of whoever is in charge of the online service specifically may not value the quality of the product itself as much as, say, the developers of different projects are.
Yeah, but you know what's interesting though? We always see Nintendo be so protective of their IP. They pull things like this. You'd think that with that in mind and all the backlash they're getting and these issues we're seeing, they'll be like, "Oh snap, we need to fix this," right? So I don't think the jury's out yet. I think they could patch this. Like I don't think we should just assume that it's never going to be fixed. I'm kind of hoping they do fix it. So I'm actually going to argue that we should continue talking about it. So if there's more awareness there, so Nintendo's like, "Oh, we should fix this."
I think the fact that that one video about the expansion pass being the most disliked video on their channel might say something. I hope.
Hopefully.
Because you would think, like, because we could look at YouTube as an example where YouTube Rewind was like the most disliked video ever or something, and then they just ceased doing YouTube Rewind, like they just don't make them anymore.
Yeah, but how much does Nintendo care about that versus YouTube?
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. Like,
YouTube would care about YouTube, but does Nintendo care about YouTube? Like
Nintendo, it depends, because it's like they could look at it as like almost like a test to see like what the reception is looking like, right? But it also depends on like whoever's in charge of that, would they care, because they're making the money, right? Yeah. So would it matter to them that if they're making, I don't know how much they're making, but let's just put a number out there and say like millions off of like Nintendo Switch Online expansion pass, and they say, "Oh, look, we got the most disliked video ever on our channel. Oh well, we're still making millions." You know, like it depends on who's in charge and whether or not they feel the need that it's necessary to, you know, tackle the issue in the first place.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, obviously only time's gonna tell, right?
Yeah.
But you know, I would say overall, I'm okay with my service. Like, I don't regret buying it. I do hope that they improve on it, though, right? I do hope that they patch Ocarina of Time, they patch Mario Kart 64, fix these games, because they're really important games in Nintendo's history, and right now this is like the easiest modern way to play them. So, you know, a lot of people who didn't play these games before are going to finally try them, right? And do you really want this to be how they experience them, you know, with these glaring issues? Nintendo in general is very protective of their franchises, so, you know, I'm kind of hoping that they do fix it sooner than later.
Yeah.
So, you know, we'll see with that. But there is something else we should discuss here in relation to that, and that is how there have been data mines, and apparently there's like 50 plus like Sega Genesis games already, like, you know, planned, as well as like 38 and 64 games. So if you're worried about them adding games, they have a lineup of games already apparently like ready to go here. And the rumor is that there's going to be more frequent updates for the expansion pack than there was for the base offerings of NES and SNES. So hopefully that's true. Hopefully we see a lot of these games. I do feel pretty good about the lineup. I mentioned this earlier. I actually am more excited for N64 and Sega Genesis than I was for NES and SNES. So, you know, I'm optimistic about the software we're going to see for this. We even saw that apparently Nintendo unbanned GoldenEye in Germany for some reason. There's been some debate and speculation that maybe this is a sign that Nintendo's going to get GoldenEye on N64 Online. They get GoldenEye on there with online play without any glaring glitches. I think that's going to be a big, big, big W, because of all the games that people would doubt Nintendo would ever get back for N64, sort of a virtual console online offering, is GoldenEye, because of all the rights issues there. So if they get that going, that's a big, big deal. Not to mention, I think it also should be noted that we already have a confirmed Rare game coming, and that's Banjo and Kazooie. With Banjo-Kazooie coming, that could also mean more. The rumors have suggested that. So maybe we do get like a Diddy Kong Racing, right? Or Banjo-Tooie, or Perfect Dark. That would be amazing. Killer Instinct, games that have there are multiplayer centric. That would be really fun to see. Donkey Kong 64, for example. There's a lot of like really cool Rare games that have multiplayer on them. That'd be nice, and just Rare games in general were pretty good back then. So that'd be amazing. The other game though that I kind of doubt will be added, but if they were to do it, that would be amazing, is Conker's Bad Fur Day. Like that and GoldenEye are like the two games that are probably like the least likely to come to N64 Online. But we are getting rare games, and if GoldenEye comes, and I believe that was rated M, right? Maybe it wasn't. It might have just been rated teen, but it was pretty bloody. If that's coming, maybe Conker's Bad Fur Day could also come. But that also has like a lot of like suggestive sexual themes and stuff, and so that's kind of, that used to be a big no-no for Nintendo, which they weren't happy about Conker's Bad Fur Day, even though it happened. So we'll see there. We'll see there. I have a few super chats I should get to. Taker610, thank you very much for the super chat. Here's some coin to offset the cost more. I am playing Ocarina of Time now and enjoying it. The issues haven't bothered me. Just finished Water Temple, no biggie. Yeah, thank you very much, Taker. I appreciate that. Yeah, exactly. Like, there are issues. I hope Nintendo fixes it, but it hasn't, like, ruined my enjoyment of the games. But, you know, why not make it perfect? Because it should be perfect. Right. So, yeah. I'll say that there have been a few times where I've been a little frustrated with the controls. In general, it's fine to me, but using the right stick to press the C buttons isn't always the most accurate. I've accidentally brought out my bombs multiple times when I'm trying to use the hook shot or the ocarina. So, you know, I do wish they would offer a little bit more options for that. Now I know you can sort of customize your controls with the base like Switch control customization options, but I just wish there was something a little bit more integrated there. And I have heard that there are still some limitations, so maybe they also eventually patch things where that's kind of remedied a little bit. At least make the controls more clear. Another nice thing I would like to see is more customization options for the border. You just get one border. Like, you can't even do a black border. It's like that gray border that shows your icon on the top left. Takes away from my immersion a little bit. I wish they offered more options for that. Another thing... Like, go on.
I was just going to say, to add on to what you're saying, is that since they just released an OLED, a black border that just has nothing on it would have been perfect. Especially for a game like Star Fox.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying there. Yeah, because then you just see the stuff on the side. You're like, no. There is another thing that they do that I don't like. You can turn it off though in the settings. The default, like it gives you control suggestions, and it kind of like clouds up the UI a little bit. Like it puts like a black bar on the bottom to tell you what to do. I turn that off in my settings. So if you go to your settings, when you're in the main page of the app on both Sega Genesis and N64, you can turn that off, so that black bar at the bottom that shows like start and stuff goes away. I think you have to restart the game so it actually shows, or the software, but it does take that away, and the screen's actually a little bit bigger because of it. Like it squishes it, it makes it smaller, scales it. So, you know, I just wish that wasn't by default. I wish they just asked you, hey, do you want controller suggestions? No. So they're just a little thing. And all these things they can patch, right? Like if Nintendo's plan is to build on this and continually update and expand on it, then you also hope that they don't just do that by offering more content, but also by looking what they already have and improving that experience, smoothing it out, you know, giving us patches for those ROMs, making them less glitchy, just making the UI a little bit better, giving us more customization options like that. I think will go a long ways towards this premium service, because that's what it is. It's a premium service. So yeah, I definitely hope that they start improving those things.
Yeah, I mean, you want to make sure your premium service feels like a premium service to, you know, convince people to want to resubscribe in the first place. Right.
That's another point. Like, they may not. They may not do it until next year. Like, they better do it before. I don't think they should take that long to fix some of these things. That would be bad. It wouldn't instill a lot of confidence. They should do it like soon. Like really soon. Like, you know, it'd be nice if they announced something next week. Not even like, I doubt they will, because Nintendo rarely does this. But sometimes when there's backlash for certain things in games, you do see the developer come out and say, "Hey, look, we've heard about the issues. We're working to fix it." Like, that happened for Sonic Colors, the remake for it, right? There was a lot of reported issues. What happened? They came out and said, "Hey, we're going to work to fix some of these issues." Like something as little as that, just to show that Nintendo is going to take steps towards that would be nice. But it's also Nintendo; they tend to be very quiet about these things. Doesn't mean they're not going to work on it, but we won't know right until it happens. So
yeah,
that's kind of a yeah.
I think the only time they've ever did anything like that was for Metroid Prime, really.
Well, like to announce their development restart.
Yeah, like I think that's like the only
that and Breath of the Wild.
Yeah,
they put little videos. Well, I mean, no. So like there is it happens, but those are like the more significant ones. Yeah. So like for example, there was a game-breaking glitch in Metroid Dread. Towards the end, it would stop your progress. They put out like a tweet or something like, "Hey, look, we've noticed that there's an issue towards the end of the game. We're working diligently to get this out by the end of the month." They got out by the end of the month. Like within a few weeks, they put out a patch to fix that game-breaking issue for Metroid Dread. So like that's happened before. But will they do stuff like that for the expansion pack to Nintendo Online, which isn't like one of their big marquee titles of the year?
Right, but I would also argue that just to play devil's advocate here, that it is one of their biggest moneymakers if it's going to be a reoccurring service, right? If they're going to have like a $50 premium service and every year they sell that to a bunch of people, that's worth a lot more money than one game release.
It's also clear that this has a lot of other. It's not just Nintendo that's involved with the games on this service. For example, Microsoft is as well. So you would think that Nintendo, like, there's money coming from other people, right? Like from other companies. That Nintendo would definitely want this to be represented well. So I kind of hear you there, and I hope Nintendo feels the same way, and they make steps towards, fixing this.
Right.
But
honestly, it's like, if I was working at Nintendo and I had any kind of, you could just make the argument that, look, if you don't improve the emulation, people are either gonna not subscribe, or there's gonna be a lot of people out there who aren't subscribed who chose not to because of what they saw. No,
I've heard a lot of people say that they're glad that they didn't do this because they're hearing about all the issues, right? They and I think because there's so much conversation about the issues, it's making it seem worse than it is. Because again, like I said, I've enjoyed it. It's not broken, but there are issues. Like they should be fixed, and it is causing this narrative to be built that this is a very, very poorly polished emulation. And there's definitely issues. It's not a good look, is the point. Like regardless of where you stand, it's clearly not a good look. And there's absolutely some truth to the criticisms, even if you don't agree with the criticisms entirely. There's some truth to them, and that's a problem. They should be fixed. Right.
Even if you don't agree with the severity of it, the level of how bad it is, right? Even if you don't agree with that, if you see it as exaggerated, then fine, that's okay. You could see it as exaggerated, right? And if you still enjoy it, that's great. But if it is exaggerated, maybe Nintendo will listen. Maybe. If they think it's as bad as people are making it out to be, then that makes it more like, I feel like that makes it a little bit more likely for them to take a look at it and notice it.
Yeah. I'll say that, just considering that, I wonder if that's why some people do exaggerate, though, because they're trying to create a narrative to inspire change.
Maybe.
I personally don't believe in lying, but definitely, I believe in truth. So if there are truthfully issues, and I can tell you personally, I've objectively seen issues, they should be addressed. Like absolutely.
Yeah.
So
correct,
yeah. I got another super chat here from Midnight Naomi. Thank you very much, Naomi. Super chats until channel memberships are available. I'm sorry, I still haven't gotten channel memberships going. I keep getting reminded, and I haven't set them up yet. I gotta create the emojis. I don't know. I'll try to get. I know I've said this already. I should. This is to the benefit of the channel, so like I should do it. But I'm just gonna say coming soon. Memberships. How soon? Not gonna tell you when, but coming soon.
you gonna shadow drop it? Is that the plan?
They're gonna be shadow. They're gonna be shadow dropped. Yeah, yeah. But is there anything else you want to say in relation to N64 Online, the expansion pack, or are you kind of ready to move on a little bit?
I think the only thing I want to mention is just I feel if you're someone who feels like these issues, like, and you're not lying, you just feel like it is that bad for you, then that's perfectly okay. Like everyone has their own different like levels of what they're willing to accept as okay. But I have seen like the occasional video that was like, not exactly true in a way. I remember one particular video that was making the rounds where it essentially showed Link with like an invisible torso, and he rolls and then like it crashes, like the whole thing crashes.
I don't know.
And my problem with that video is that is a glitch that you can do in pretty much every version of the game, and it crashes every version of the game.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily a like a Nintendo Switch Online specific issue, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like I've seen some speedrunners make videos on this, right? And like a speedrunner who knows the game, like in and out all around, like on the several planes of existence, like they can do weird little things to glitch themselves at different points in the game. Like that's, I think you can't judge off that, right? Because they're taking advantage of really weird little things, right? Like, but when you're just playing through the game normally and you're seeing graphical issues, that's legitimate, right?
Right.
So there's a difference there. Doing things for if you're sequence breaking and tricking the system and coming up with weird ways to break it, like every game is like that. Every game is like that. So that I definitely hear you there. But there is one thing we didn't address too much, and that is the reported input lag issues.
Oh, right.
I'm not saying they don't exist, but if no one had really brought it up to me, I would not have thought of it as an issue. Like it's not too discernible. So I don't like I just don't think it's that bad. Input lag is kind of something inherent with this already, and I personally haven't felt like it's been anything of significance. That's my personal feeling, right? And I mean, I play a lot of games. I've replayed a lot. The games on N64 Online, I've played through multiple times, a lot of them. And I don't feel like there is really that much of an issue in that department personally. That's my experience of it, though. I've seen some people put out videos and they're like, they press A, and it's just like, and then there's a response. I think it's a little misleading. I don't think it's necessarily that bad.
Yeah, I mean, from my experience playing, because the games I played were Win Back, Ocarina of Time, Mario Kart, and Yoshi's Story. And from my experience, at least playing them offline, because online is a whole other can of worms. I think it's only noticeable when I'm playing a game that requires like a quick motion, like a quick jerk of some kind. Because I think the biggest instance where I noticed it was when I was playing Mario Kart 64 and I was trying to do like a really sharp turn. And I noticed that it took a little bit to really turn, like it didn't fully commit to it. And part of me thought at first that maybe the game just was like that back then. Like I just wasn't, because it's been a long time since I played Mario Kart 64. But then I heard about the issues, and maybe that's what that is. I don't know. And I want to say for me personally, I did find it to be slightly noticeable, but it really depended on the game. Any game that required any kind of fast motion, I feel like.
I guess the other thing is that like I played a lot of these games on Wii U Virtual Console more recently, right? And apparently Wii U Virtual Console also had input lag issues, right? So my baseline is Wii U Virtual Console, which apparently is a really bad emulator. So there's that, but it's also like, I mean, I haven't played an actual N64 in a long time, so it'd be kind of neat to go back and kind of compare them. Right. But I also feel like, I will choose a Pro controller over an N64 controller any day. It's just not as comfortable. And this is gonna be a segue, but I played Mario Party Superstars this weekend, And I've played a lot of those mini games from the N64 Mario Party games, and there's just something about the controls that just doesn't feel right. But when you play them with a Pro Controller remade in Mario Party Superstars, they feel snappy, they feel good. Don't have issues with that. So yeah, that's Mario Party Superstars is fun stuff. I liked it very much.
Yeah, I definitely like I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, like I'm definitely like extremely biased when it comes to judging the game's boards in particular, because I grew up pretty much playing like the first 3 Mario Party games, and then I took a small break. I didn't play 4, but then I played 5, 6, skipped 7, played 8, and then that's like my history, I guess, with like Mario Party, and I absolutely adored the first 3 games. And I enjoyed the GameCube ones. I didn't love them as much, but I enjoyed them. Like the mini games were still fun and the boards were still good. It wasn't until like 9 and 10 where I kind of really fell off, and I just wasn't enjoying the series as much anymore. And I guess even if it's not necessarily new boards, just the idea of them going back to the old school, I guess, like the classic way of like designing the boards and like the way they more intricate in some cases, not all the boards. I think it's just better. Like that's how Mario Party should be, in my opinion. And on one hand, it's like, okay, they're not new boards, but because this is how I envision Mario Party to be, this is my I would say this is my go-to Mario Party now, because Super Mario Party isn't quite there for me. I mean, it's still a fun game.
Yeah, no, this is it.
Yeah,
Mario Party Superstars is it. This is it. Like it has a lot of the quality of life updates we've seen over previous Mario Parties, so the gameplay felt pretty fluid and snappy to me. I'm talking about the mini games, but also the boards. Like it didn't feel like a slogfest. Like there are some board games you play depending on which Mario Party, and it kind of is like it feels too long. It feels like it kind of drags. Did not feel that way at all. Playing these, like it feels like the pacing of them is just right. The turns don't feel like they take too long. They're just, the timing of it feels appropriate. I don't feel like I have to wait too long for my turn. I play with 4 people, so it's not like just 2. Like it was an appropriate amount. I mean, and it just felt good. And the mini games felt polished. They look great visually. The game definitely is very, very aesthetically pleasing. It looks nice. They have a nice selection of quality mini games. The boards are fun. They're not like they each have like their own gimmick, but they're not like ridiculous gimmicks, I don't feel. The pacing of turns is great. I just think it's just a very well put together package. Like this is like the ideal Mario Party experience. Like if anyone asks me which Mario Party I should play, I'm like, play Superstars. It takes the best of all previous Mario Parties and puts it into one nice package.
Yeah, I agree. And I also like some of the additions they've had for like players who aren't necessarily playing, like the sticker system.
Yeah, you can just mess around with the sticker system. Yeah,
and I feel like that's such a good idea to have like the other players do something while the other while someone's playing their turn, because it's just I think it's funny how often I'm able to spam like good game with Toad, and then when something bad happens to someone else, and just like
you can kind of mess with people, joke with them, troll with them. Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, it's definitely a fun little thing that they added.
I really like that. I think the only thing I kind of want them to add is if you're playing online, I think it'd be cool if you're able to look at your map even when you're not in the middle of playing your turn, so you can kind of plan ahead. I think that'd be cool addition. I'm not sure if that's something they'd want to do
with online, because it's not something you can do on local.
Yeah, that's the only thing that makes me think they wouldn't do that, because if you can't do it offline, it'd be a little different. But in general, I still do really enjoy the game. I think it's my definitive Mario Party for now.
I noticed something while playing, because of the little emoji icons, the stickers, right? you can kind of block the map off when someone's looking at it. And there were a couple times when I was playing where people asked, "Hey, can you turn off that sticker so I can see that part of the map?" So that's like a little UI thing that they may want to tinker with if they do patch it.
Yeah.
They may not. They may not see it as enough of an issue. But if you're doing, how does online work? Because I didn't play online. Like, does that still get in the way exactly the same?
No, because when you're playing online, you don't see the other players looking at their stickers. Okay. So it doesn't pop up on screen at all.
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
Yeah. So, it's only really an issue locally.
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure, because it's always, at least from my experience, it's always been like the player that's on the bottom right corner of the screen that's blocking something, like a dialogue choice or something like that. Yeah. And if that person wants to be absolutely toxic, they can just leave that up and not, not choose to remove it. So, yeah, they probably should do that in some way. I'm not sure what they could do exactly. Part of me wants to say like they have to make it like transparent, just so you can see through it or something.
That's an option. That might work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's the best thing I can think of at the moment.
Yeah. Or they could just scale the map a little bit. So it's just kind of more like the map's a little smaller, but it just doesn't have to be that much smaller, so it still fits on the screen.
Yeah, but then dialogue would still be an issue, because if let's say you're doing, like, you have to star and they're doing that question like, oh, no or yes, the person in the bottom right corner, if they have their stickers up, you could still block the dialogue choices. That's happened a few times when I've been playing. I mean, obviously the star, I don't think anyone would really say no to the star unless they just asked. I don't know why, I guess. But for some other strategic decisions, like choosing to teleport somewhere in like Horrorland or something like that, like you might want to know what you're picking before you press A. Yeah,
I hear you there. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but I mean, like I guess, like I just overall though, like I think this game, it's just like the ideal Mario Party. Like I'm gonna play this for years. Like it's just gonna be the ideal Mario Party game to play with. I mean, I do kind of. I mean, like I said, I haven't bought it myself yet. I played it with friends, but like sure. Would I want there to be another map or two? Would I want there to be a few more characters, more mini games? Yeah, I want more content added. So hopefully they do like have a DLC at some point, add more content. But
yeah,
I feel like there's a pretty decent offering already.
Yeah, I will say, like, if I'm gonna try to choose something to like critique, is that it does feel like there is not the minigame specifically, because we have like 100 of them, but in terms of boards, it does feel light to me. But I also, and I covered this in the video I uploaded today on my channel. I do feel like the game sets itself up. It sets it up well to release DLC in some way, because they essentially, if they want to add more boards to the game, they kind of already have 10 games, well, maybe 8, because 9 and 10 have like the card mechanic, but they have like 8 games worth of boards they can pick from and essentially remaster them or remake them to fit the theme of Superstars. So I think the game has the potential to be a lot bigger. I just don't know if they'll do that, because I remember.
So there's 5 boards and 100 mini games, right?
Yes.
If they add another map, shouldn't they just add 20 more mini games?
I mean, look, if they add more mini games, I would be totally 100% down for that. Like I'm not gonna complain to having more content. I just feel like with what we have now, the boards are the only thing that feels light to me.
Okay, I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the game just came out, so we'll see. Maybe they'll even add the DLC for free through Nintendo Online Plus expansion pack. Maybe not. I don't know.
That'd be nice.
It would be really nice, right? But I want to check in the chat real quick, and then we'll get to our final topic for the evening.
All right.
Super Chris added me. Random question. Besides Kirby and the Forgotten Land, what do you think HAL Laboratory will have planned for Kirby's 30th anniversary? So, first I'll say, do we need anything else? We're getting an epic 3D Kirby adventure. Do we need anything else? But I mean, that alone is satisfying to me. That is what I'm actually gonna buy that, right? Like, I don't always buy Kirby games, but I'm gonna buy Kirby in the Forgotten Land because that looks like a really exciting Kirby entry. But since you ask, I still think that there's probably a decent chance that at some point within a year from now we'll see some sort of eShop Kirby release. Why? Because there's just always like small Kirby things coming out almost every year. So like that's not a crazy prediction. Plus, at one point I heard that. So, you know, I think that yeah, there could be something else in for Kirby's 30th anniversary. Is that really coming up next year? I didn't realize that. 2022, the implication being that 1992 was the first Kirby game, which makes sense, I guess.
I will say, like, I feel I'm 100% getting that game just based. I don't know. It's weird because I actually bought Star Allies, and if I compare Star Allies to the upcoming game, it's just one of them clearly has a lot more effort put into it. I feel so. I feel like I'd be insane if I bought Star Allies and not Forgotten Land.
Yeah. I think. I mean, Star Allies looks pretty, right? But it's just kind of like it feels like a basic Kirby game, you know?
Yeah.
Forgotten Land it just seems like more ambitious, not just from a visual perspective, but just like it just seems to be a fresh take on Kirby, and that's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would have like issues, maybe not issues, but I definitely would at least hesitate to have bought Star Allies if it was the other way around, where Forgotten Land released first and Star Allies came second. And that's probably deliberately done to be like, who knows? But I don't know. I wasn't exactly hyped for Star Allies. I was looking forward to it, but I wasn't like hyped for it. But Forgotten Land, I'm actually like hyped for it. Like, I actually really want to play that game.
Yeah, no, it's one of my most anticipated games for next year. I'm very, very excited for it. Very excited. It's just I want to see. It's one of the. It's a big deal. I think it's gonna be a big deal. It might be one of the best selling Kirby games ever. Actually, I can see it happening.
Yeah, I think I can see that. Yeah.
See, I'm just looking through the chat here. Okay. Let's just get to the final topic. So,
all right.
Remakes. I've kind of been like thinking about that lately, mainly because of what we talked about today. Really, Mario Party Superstars in a way is a remake, but it's like a conglomeration remake of multiple Mario Party games, right?
Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird one.
But it's remade multiple maps, and all the maps are from previous Mario Party games. So all the mini games, it's just multiple ones put into one package, right? So in a way, it's almost like a new Mario Party game, but it's remakes and reimaginings of a whole bunch of old Mario Party stuff. And I kind of like that idea. It's really cool. And I'm not saying I want Nintendo to do that again for other things, but, you know, what if they were? Like, what if they did do that, you know? And actually, I'll come back to that idea. But also, you know, playing through Ocarina of Time again, just seeing these different games on N64 and Sega Genesis, like, you know, just playing old games. Like, some of them I would love to be remade, specifically Ocarina of Time. But Shifty, I know I asked you to come up with some of your own ideas. Or I hope I didn't, like, steal one already, but, you know... Like, what are some of your ideas for remakes Nintendo could do that are kind of like semi-reasonable to expect? Or they don't have to be reasonable. If you have something crazy, you know, go for that as well. Yeah.
All right. Well, see, the funny thing is that I had two ideas, right? And both of them are Zelda related. And I guess in a way you could argue you took one of mine with mentioning Ocarina of Time. But I also feel like it totally depends on what we imagine the execution to be like, right?
Yeah.
Before the podcast started, I mentioned that this would be like a dream scenario, so it's not something I necessarily ever reasonably expect, right? This isn't something that I think would actually ever happen, but I think if it did, it would be something that would blow me away like completely.
Yeah.
So I would like to imagine a remake of Ocarina of Time that is maybe not exactly the same, but it's structured similarly to the Final Fantasy VII remake we got not too long ago.
Yeah.
Where essentially it is a remake of like the best they can make it look for whatever hardware it's on, right?
Yeah.
But also adding a ton more to what was already there. So we can see like everyone that's played Ocarina of Time back in the day has always mentioned the idea of seeing Sheik's story that happened, throughout that 7-year time gap. We can see that. We can see just a lot of like extra context to different things that have happened throughout that game that we wouldn't have been able to see otherwise.
So
that's my dream scenario.
No, we're on the same page.
Okay.
So I don't know if you saw it, but like over a year ago, I made a video talking about exactly this. Like, what if Nintendo were to reimagine Ocarina of Time in the vein of 7 Remake? And that's not to say that they put in a lot of filler content, but actually maybe take note what they did with 7 Remake and kind of learn from it. And in the sense that any sort of additional content they put in there, they make it meaningful. So how do you do that exactly? Well, there's a lot of things. But to your point, like learning more about Sheik, right? Like Zelda disappears in the child timeline, right? And you're kind of left wondering when you're playing, like, where is she? Where's she at? Like, you can't find. There's no hint of where she's at anywhere on the map of the world. What if they were to explain that? What if there were to be gameplay that shows kind of what happened there? That'd be really cool. That'd be awesome. Like, maybe making Zelda playable would be really interesting. Adding a whole other sort of gameplay dynamic there. But if they were to redo the visuals, they would have to probably rework the map as well.
Right.
And reimagine it too. Make it seem like something that seems more of like a reasonable world for today's standards. But from a extending the gameplay standpoint, Ocarina of Time is the game that sort of split the timeline into 3. What if they were to come up with a way to sort of explain that? What if they expand Ocarina of Time in a way where you make choices and you do different things, and depending on what you do, that leads to one of the 3 endings, Even though technically Ocarina of Time, as you see it, shows 2, but maybe they could retcon that a little bit, or maybe, they could show different things. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what if they create a timeline with this reimagining where Link stays, right? Or there's that one ending that still is just Link going back to the past. But then there's the other where he's the fallen hero. Like what if they were to do something like that? That's one option. Not saying there has to be alternating endings, but that's just one consideration. Like, they don't have to do that, and they can still show how the timeline could potentially split. You know what I mean?
Right. And it's interesting you brought that up because the one of the other things I was going to mention that I actually skipped my mind until now was something to do with the ending as well. Because if I don't want to go into, I don't know if spoilers is like a thing to talk about for FF7 remake, but it doesn't quite follow the same storyline. I guess it's just, I want to leave it at that. It goes its own path.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, and my imagining, because you're mentioning like different endings to go like towards like the different timelines.
Yeah.
My thing was, what if we are led to believe that the game is essentially Ocarina of Time, but just remade in all its glory and whatnot, right? But the ending is specifically the decline ending.
Yeah.
Because I think it would not only would surprise everyone playing the game, but it would also be like they would actually finally solidify that specific timeline, because many people just don't feel like that particular ending makes sense. So I feel like if you make Ocarina of Time, but just specifically give us that ending, then that really solidifies that in people's minds.
Yeah, dude. So part of me is like, oh, but they should have a good ending. But like, I mean, there might be a way to still have a good ending and still do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I don't know. There's options.
Knowing Nintendo, I don't see them doing that, which is why I refer to it as like a dream scenario, right?
Well, this is what hear me out. What if the end of the game, Link does fall, but in this reimagining, it's not actually the end of the game, right? So what it does is that it does explain the fallen hero split, and Link does die, but that's not the end of the game. There's more game beyond that.
Okay.
You know? So maybe Link does die, right? But there's like a reincarnation, or there's like a, you know, he's saved somehow, you know what I mean? Like it's one of those situations where his heart stops, like he does die, right? But something occurs where he is saved in some way, you know? Kind of similar to Breath of the Wild, really, right? Except maybe it doesn't become, that wouldn't be the beginning of the game for like,
right.
But you know, like maybe it adds like another third, which might be a lot, but maybe that doesn't have to be a whole other third, but you know, it adds like a handful more hours or something to the experience.
Yeah. I'd be very interested to see what that would look like too, just to try to imagine like a sort of almost like an epilogue to Ocarina of Time that takes place after the game, and see what they can do to try to make the decline timeline seem more, I guess, optimistic or positive of sorts. I'm not entirely sure how they would go about it.
Well, one thing they could do, right, is that what it actually does, it creates a fourth split, which would be amazing. That would be hilarious. So,
my lord!
But it makes sense though. Hear me out. It makes sense because the split would be that, so it wouldn't actually change the timeline, right? In the sense like all the existing timelines would still be those timelines, but the fourth split would be, it shows Link fall, and there's that fallen timeline. You see the devastation, but there is, like, you know, because the time thing, maybe that somehow relates to how Link is resurrected and what you play. So it explains the fallen hero timeline, but then that fourth timeline is where Link is saved somehow, and you still end up having like the good ending, right? A good ending. But in order to have that good ending, there's a fourth timeline split, and the story indicates the fallen hero timeline where there is tragedy, you know? I think that'd be pretty cool. And I think that would work. And people would be like, oh, well, you had another timeline. Well, what do you expect? It's Zelda. Like, it's just gonna happen. Like, in reality, like, okay, I say reality, but I don't know. More like, you know, like theories. Like, there's supposedly like an infinite amount of like parallel universes, right? Like, why should there only be 3 in Zelda? You know, there can be an infinite amount in theory. So, you know, showing another one, I think that could be how they kind of like explain that, and then also kind of serve to show us some actual like explanation of why there's that split at the end.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I just feel like, I don't know, I feel like it would complicate it even further than it already is, if that makes sense. I don't know. I honestly, the way I would imagine it is more if they just add in a bunch of details we never knew about that would make this same timeline be the same, but to us, the player in that particular game we're playing, seem more positive. If that makes sense. Like they can add in things to the beginning of that timeline, because after that is I believe it mentions like something about the ceiling war, and then there's what was it? Is it, which game comes after that? I forgot. I want to say it was A Link to the Past. So they can have, I don't know, maybe the epilogue takes place during that ceiling war or something. I don't know. And they can add in some details
maybe what happens. All right, so here's another idea. Okay. Kind of building off what you said. So, like, if they make this game, it's gonna be a bigger game, right? Like, they're gonna add more things in it. It's like maybe they make the towns bigger. Maybe they add a few more towns, more side quests, but meaningful side quests. You know, kind of like Majora's Mask, where there are these characters, there are narratives, and they sort of intertwine with each other, right? Like, I'm not asking that if they were to reimagine this, they make it as big as Breath of the Wild. I'm not asking for that. Something, but like a reimagining of Ocarina of Time, and just really dense, right? And what they do is maybe there's like you still have an interaction with the sages, like more you learn more about the sages, like you know more about their lives and their community, and there's a lot more quests with them, so you build up more of a relation, and just like, you know, character and story beats with the 6 sages, right, or the 7 sages actually, because, you know, Zelda, Sheik, which to your point, maybe they do explain how she did her training, what happened to her, and with all this extra background, what it sort of leads to the Sealing War, right? With Link Fallen, who's going to pick things up and try and deal with things? The sages, right? So maybe that's how they sort of explain the end of when Link falls, but maybe also Link falls, but his spirit still remains, so you still use Link to some extent, right? So maybe it's like it does go into that whole idea of like a dead Link but still playing kind of thing. But what happens that he does sort of fade away, right? So it has a somber ending, but it sort of explains everything, and it just leads into the Sealing War, to your point. Like, what if it's... I have to double check the whole timeline thing, but however they deal with Link being the fallen hero, they show that, you know? Right. They could do that, and it'll be cool because we'll see these different characters, you know, take the spotlight at the end, which we had a lot more interaction with this reimagining.
Yeah, I mean, I think because going into your whole idea of like trying to make the ending at least somewhat more positive instead of like a very like sad ending.
He's dead. That's it. Everyone's dead.
Yeah, he's just dead. All right, bye. Credits roll.
Yeah.
Credits roll.
Yeah, I don't think you can do that. Like, I mean, you could, but I don't honestly think they're gonna. No, I don't like. You know what I mean? Like, it could be somber. Like Ocarina of Time's ending was somber. You know, like you didn't get to like live a beautiful, happy life with Princess Zelda. Like, no, you have to go back in time and live out your childhood. And you could argue, oh, well, they get to live happily ever after in the child timeline. Not if you play Majora's Mask, but like the future timeline, the adult timeline, there is no Link, right? So like that timeline is kind of sad because that Zelda doesn't have Link there, you know. So it's sad for them. And then also Navi goes away too, like, and then if you play Majora's Mask, you kind of, they don't tell you specifically, but Navi dies at the end of Ocarina of Time, and Link grieves over Navi throughout Majora's Mask. And then we also learn from Twilight Princess that Link eventually becomes a Stalfos. So you know, he doesn't like die of old age happily with a big family. He does become an adult. You know, but
Hero of Time definitely has like probably my favorite story when it comes to like a personal Link. Like if he's not my favorite, he's definitely up there, right? Yeah. But I do see what you're saying about like you don't necessarily want the ending to just be like, you know, a really depressing ending for people. Yeah. So I imagine without making new timelines and without giving us just that depressing ending, I honestly feel like the best thing they could do is just have this epilogue idea you mentioned, right? And have it be a time skip that essentially just goes into the imprisoning war or the sealing war or whatever it was called. I don't quite remember, but it was the war that was mentioned like in A Link to the Past. Have that be the ending, and have the ending be that like, oh, Hyrule finally, the 7 sages in Hyrule finally like manages to seal away Ganon. Because that would not be too much. That wouldn't be too different from your typical like Zelda ending at that point. The idea is that like maybe there's something you can do in the main game of Ocarina of Time. Maybe it's part of the main quest line. They add in something that where Link does something that helps them during the imprisoning war. Yeah, and that way it's kind of like, oh, you know, Link helped us even then, like even all that time later. You know? Yeah, maybe something like that. Another thing that might simplify it a little bit would be the game still has like the climax around the same point. But maybe there's just like an extra moment that's thrown in where it looks like Link's about to die, and it implies that under certain circumstances he would have died if such and such character didn't like come in to save them, right? Like, what if like they kind of like make the final fight even more like grandiose and epic than it already is, and the sages actually have to come in to assist, right? And there's a moment where Link looks like Link is going to straight up die, but some of the sages that you helped, which you have more of a relationship with because of all the side questing you did throughout this expanded reimagining of Ocarina of Time, like that kind of ties that in,
there and they sort of help him, but there's an implication of that he could have died, and maybe that could sort of be like, hey, there's the sign of the fallen hero timeline, because under different circumstances, if you didn't build up this much of a relationship with these sages, maybe they wouldn't have saved you and you would have died, and it would have been the fallen hero timeline, like, and that would have the game would still end around the same point, just adds like kind of like an additional little interesting story beat at the end.
Right. I definitely do, like, regardless of the way they would handle it, I definitely do think it's a good idea to have the ending in some capacity.
Yeah, address it somehow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They should address it, because if there's any timeline that people have the most, I guess, negativity towards, or like maybe this, I don't know, they just don't like it as much.
It's just that there's no sign of that happening, right? Of there being a third split. Like, there's nothing in the story that's like, oh, there's a third split. Like, yeah, Link fights something ridiculous, like, but there's no like moment where you're like, oh, he's dead, right? Like, that doesn't happen.
And it's weird, because you can make that same argument for pretty much any Zelda game in existence, to just have like a hypothetical timeline where he dies, You know
what it could be? So the intro to my channel where Link falls and there's a fairy that brings him back to life?
Yeah.
That. But it's a story one. It's not any of the fairies you have, right? It's like, maybe, what if, here's an idea. So that happens, right? And the one that restores your life is Navi. And also it kind of like further explains why Navi dies. Because Navi uses her life essence to revive you, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And that's the way they can do it. They can sort of imply that there's some sort of space-time nonsense going on there. So that's why it's like a timeline split. Like, maybe it's something that Navi and Zelda sort of kind of do together. And then, Navi seems a little more tired after that. And then there's kind of like that final moment at the end. Where she flies away. That'd be cool. Heck, we're talking about what if this great reimagining just gives us more about Navi? Like, what if they, like, think about it, like, we don't really think about the fairies, right? We don't think about them about having lives or personalities, really. Like, they're just, oh, there's a pink fairy, give me life, right? Like, that's it. Like, what if, or like all the fairies with all the different Kokiris, like, what if these fairies, like, we learn more about them, we learn more about Navi. Like, what if there's like, Navi has a character arc in this reimagining?
Okay.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
They can do that for so many characters. And I would be very interested to see, like, what...
But isn't it crazy that Navi's, like, one of the most important characters? Like, why wouldn't they just give her more of a character arc,
Right.
Because she's a navigator. Like, if you think about all other future Zelda games, all the navigators have more of a story arc. Midna does. The King of Red Lions does. What if they had something like that for even Fi, right? Like, what if they were to do something like that for Navi? Like, there was something to that, but it wasn't, like, you don't know about her past at all, why is she all of a sudden being thrown to this non-Kokiri, to guide? What if they were to tie it into that a little bit, there's some, I think there's some juicy potential here.
Yeah, Ocarina of Time definitely feels like the game that if they were ever going to give the FF7 remake treatment, that would be the game to do it with.
Say it again.
I'm saying that if there was any Zelda game for them to reimagine in that kind of style of the FF7 remake, it feels like
it's Ocarina of Time. Yeah.
Yeah. Like
I don't think you do any other. I don't think you do any other. I think if Nintendo were to do that, the people would be like, "Oh, we'll do it for Majora's Mask." I just don't think Majora's Mask. Like, it's not that I wouldn't want Majora's Mask to be remade, but like, it just doesn't. It just, like, from a story perspective, it doesn't really feel like there's a need. You know what I mean?
Right. Like, Majora's Mask already does a really good job with its side quests, so like,
yeah.
It doesn't. I don't know. For me, it doesn't really.
You just have to like change it a lot.
Yeah.
Like
it doesn't feel like it necessarily needs more like side content. Like, that game's already pretty robust in side content.
Yeah. Yeah, side content is kind of like the main content for
Yeah.
Majora's Mask.
Right, yeah. I mean, maybe the only thing I could think of that you could add is maybe giving like more context to the fierce deity.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if we think more about it, maybe more things will come to mind.
Yeah. That's the first thing I think of, because I've always wondered as a kid what that was, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, more on that. There's a mystery to the mask salesman as well. And you know, the mask of Majora, like, where did it come from? Right? They don't really explain where it came from, do they?
I think they just say something like a dark tribe or something, but it doesn't really go into like full detail. I think the most we got is, oh, it's a dark tribe that used it for some kind of ritual.
I mean, I guess technically, like, if they do the Ocarina of Time reimagining and it has like an expanded story there, then maybe they could be like, okay, here's Majora's Mask, and they do expand the story. Like the events of Majora's Mask still happen. It's still a big chunk of the game, but they add something to the beginning with the tribe, right? Some explanation to that. And then there's more to the epilogue with a fierce deity, I suppose. Like, maybe they could do that. And the interesting thing here, though, is that if they kind of do what we're sort of hoping for, where they give Navi more of a character arc in Ocarina of Time and show more clearly that she passes away, then they could also maybe more clearly show Link grieving for Navi and have that be a plot point as well in Majora's Mask, right? So maybe, you know, if they were to reimagine Ocarina of Time the way we're talking about, that does kind of open up more doors for them to do things for Majora's Mask as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're just like hardcore dreaming right now. Like this stuff makes sense, but will Nintendo ever do it? I don't know. Yeah,
it's a dream scenario. I don't ever expect it.
But to your point, if there is ever a game that Nintendo would sort of reimagine, in the vein of 7 Remake, it would be Ocarina of Time. So Shifty, I know we agreed to cut things off at 11, so I don't want to continue going on for too much longer because we both have things to do in the morning. But there is a remake that, like, well, 2 things. One, I alluded to, it would be kind of a neat idea if they did something like Superstars for another franchise. One that I think would make a lot of sense for would be F-Zero. You know, bring in, like, remake a lot of the 64 tracks, you know, bring in GX tracks, AX tracks, maybe some of the, I mean, well, this hasn't been that many F-Zero, so it's kind of like, why even? But actually, you know, just give us a GX HD. Just give it with online. Or make a new F-Zero.
That would be nice, but that's almost on the same tier as Dream scenario at this point. But I did mention earlier, like, before we do, like, end things, I did mention earlier that I had 2 ideas for Zelda.
Right, yeah, what's the other one?
2. The other one I thought of was essentially, like, it wouldn't be a massive reimagining, like...
Oh, before we do it, one thing I forgot to mention.
Yeah.
They would have to add a light temple dungeon.
Oh, yeah,
because, like, they just give you the medallion. Like,
yeah. And it could tie into a whole story with the light sage.
Right, yeah, exactly. You could tie into that, give us more background to him, maybe hint at the potential connection between him and the owl, Gabora. Like, there's been theories that they're the same person. What if they actually are, right? Like, maybe some of that, and just give us another dungeon.
Yeah.
Because it almost feels like there was a cut dungeon, right? Like,
yeah.
So that, but what was your other Zelda idea?
Basically, they would take the first Legend of Zelda game and essentially remake it with this. Maybe the art style could be. Back then, I used to think A Link Between Worlds, but maybe they could even do like Link's Awakening. But it would be some kind of like modern style that works for that type of game. And essentially just remake the entirety of Zelda 1 presentable for today, while also giving the game a much more expanded upon version of the dungeon creator that we had in Link's Awakening, and allowing us to essentially almost make our own Zelda game. Considering the entirety of Zelda 1 is grid-based, you could, like, hypothetically have a Zelda maker. Right.
Legend of
you-
Zelda, Zelda Maker.
and it's both a remake of the first Zelda that looks, modern, while also
A modern
giving
2D
us-
Zelda.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it would look like a modern 2D Zelda while also still giving us extra content to do, which is essentially just making dungeons, or maybe if they want to go even further, you could make the whole map in a certain way if you want to. But I don't know. I think it'd be
since
cool.
this is
if
like
there
a
was-
dreamlike scenario, like that would be dope.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's not like exactly a remake of the Legend of Zelda, to your point, but like it's like
Yeah.
here's the like you could set it up so it is a remake of that Legend of Zelda, and it's kind of based off that story, but there's like a twist where you are the one kind of creating it, right? Like what if instead of you being Link, you're like some sort of god, right? That sort of like puts these things together, and you see Link play, but you also get to play as Link because it's Zelda Maker,
Yeah. I think that'd be a really cool deal. It would definitely be like a lower budget thing, considering especially when we compare it to that of our Ocarina of Time reimagining. But I also feel like that's a game that would have a lot of like replay value. People will finally be able to play the first Zelda game, and you would also still have a lot of other things to do other than the first Zelda, right? You would be able to you could even share dungeons, just like Link's. I think Link's Awakening allowed you to do that too. Like, I think there's a lot of potential there, and I feel like Link's Awakening dipped their toes into that concept.
It could be a prototype,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm down. I'm definitely down for that. Like, I'm down for that. Just the idea of having a Zelda Maker, right? Which would be kind of like tied into the Superstars thing, where it's like a remake but not a remake, right? But there is a remake that I actually think is real and is coming, and that's Metroid Prime.
Yeah, that'd be dope.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've heard the rumors, right? Like, basically, supposedly, like, I guess it was conflated with Prime Trilogy, and apparently Retro Studios has been working on this for a couple years. And since it's been a couple years, that implies more than just like a basic like HD upscale, right? Like this has had legitimate work done. Like what would that entail? I mean, obviously better visuals, right? Modernized controls. I guess the question is, would they add like additional content, or will they just focus on quality of life updates? If we're talking about like quality of life updates, like I think they could like streamline the scan visor a bit. Speed that up, maybe like actually integrate that into the combat visor, and it happens on the fly if you set it up that way. Like maybe like when you lock onto something, you don't have to switch out of the combat visor. You can still shoot, but still scan something, and then the computer can narrate for you if you so choose, or you can opt to just have it in your logbook and check it later, as you normally can. But you could also, instead of stopping the gameplay, is my point. Like you could have it sort of detail what's going on while you sort of maintain your progression if you want to. So that'd be kind of neat. And maybe they add like a melee move or something to kind of speed up Samus's movement a bit. Maybe they tinker with the camera perspective a little bit when you're platforming, so it's a little bit easier with depth perception and such, and it makes Samus seem a little bit more acrobatic. Basically ideas that may or may not be tying into Metroid Prime 4. Just kind of show a little bit more of a modernized version of Metroid Prime. And there was a cut Kraid battle. I'd love for them to add Kraid. I mean, they added Kraid in Dread, so maybe they don't feel like they need to do that, right? But adding a little bit of extra content would be. I mean, I'm not gonna argue against that. So
yeah,
adding cut content, really, like taking the cut content and seeing and imagining how that would have actually fit in if they didn't have to cut it, and putting that in there would be pretty cool. Or having like a epilogue story sort of thing, like for example how in Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, which is basically like a remake, right? Almost. It's an ambitious remaster, right? They added the Future Connected. What if they had the same idea, Metroid Prime, if not a remake, it's an ambitious remaster. They add another epilogue story that they can access outside, and maybe it's Metroid Prime 1.5, which was a project that eventually sort of evolved into Prime 2, but there's a lot of ideas that didn't materialize there, where you're like stuck on like a space station. They had a lot of horror elements and psychological elements. Like what if that was like a side thing that they just offered that you could play, you know, outside of the main campaign, like Future Connected or Bowser's Fury.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I don't even know how to add to it because that just sounds like pretty much what I would imagine for this scenario.
Yeah. And the thing is, I actually think it's real. I don't know if everything I said will happen in it, right? But I do think we're going to see a somewhat redone Metroid Prime, and I think it's likely coming out next year because the idea of it is to come out for the 20th anniversary for Metroid Prime, and timing-wise, it feels like the ideal game to put out to tide fans over between Dread and hopefully Prime 4, like late 2023 or something.
Well, I will say, like, if that's exactly what we're getting, then it's definitely going to be one of those games that I'll get day one. Like, it's not going to be like something that I think about. You know, it's definitely something I'd be heavily interested in. Now, would it, like, when you say like this reimagining or remake of sorts, right? Would you see it being all 3 games eventually?
No.
So you think it just ends with the first one?
I think what happens is it would just be for the first one, and then 2 and 3 will be like a Twilight Princess Wind Waker HD kind of thing, where someday maybe we see them, but we don't know when. You know, like they'll have some minor quality of life updates, and they'll be upscaled to HD. The textures will be cleaned up, but they're not going to be as nearly as ambitious. Yeah. I don't really expect that. Not simply based off what's been heard, right? Yeah. I mean, what if it ends up being the case of the entire Prime trilogy sort of remade? You know, I don't expect that though. It just seems like
excessive, maybe. Or...
It seems excessive. Yeah, I think just one of them. Like if you do Metroid Prime and you add like, you know, like an epilogue story or mission, there's plenty of content there, right? So like you don't even really need to add the epilogue content. Like Nintendo can get away with not having the epilogue content. I just feel like they might, because that precedent has sort of been set by a lot of their sort of remastered enhanced ports already, right. Save for Zelda, but Zelda can get away with it, I guess. So, you know, not to mention Zelda games are also a lot longer than most other games. So, you know, there's not really like, oh man, I wish there was 20 more hours of gameplay, but there's already 100. Like, you know, Metroid Prime, on the other hand, you could beat in 15 to 20 hours, you know? So there's a little bit of a difference there.
So, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I can see that,
yeah. Yeah, I think 2 and 3 will be like, we'll see them eventually come out on a modern platform. And notice I'm not even saying Switch, right? Because like we're already talking about like if Prime Remake comes out next year and Prime 4 comes out the year after, we're gonna be like in 2024 for the year after that. What comes out then? Maybe you put out 2 and 3, right? Or maybe you wait a few more years, right? And you put out like a new 2D Metroid or like some sort of Metroid spin-off. You know, what if they make a Prime Hunters or they bring back Federation Force? Like there's so many different things they could do with the Metroid franchise. So I just don't know when you bring back 2 and 3, unless they're coming back next year in Prime Trilogy instead of a remake of Prime 1. It's the same. It's really the same issue with Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD. Like, when do you bring those reasonably, right? Like, if Breath of the Wild 2 is coming out next year, when do you bring them out? You could have multiple Metroid games, like Zelda and Metroid games, come out in a year, I guess. But if there's not a need, Nintendo won't. Like, they'll probably just. It might be just one of the things where they're just gonna wait until like a game is delayed and they need to put something there, you know? Like what if Breath of the Wild 2 gets delayed and then we get to see Twilight Princess Wind Waker HD because Breath of the Wild 2 gets delayed, right? Like maybe that happens, but we don't want that to happen, do we? I don't. I want Breath of the Wild 2.
No.
Yeah, like no. Or say Prime 4 isn't coming out 2023. What if it's like a 2024 thing? Then maybe we see like 2 and 3 come to the Switch, right? Like I could see something like that. This is all these assuming that Prime Remake is real and Prime Trilogy is not. So you know, we'll see. Maybe soon. Maybe really soon. I know that like I pretty much kind of like said what you would want in that. So I don't know if you have anything to add.
I don't know, honestly. I mean, definitely new content in general. I just don't know what off the top of my head that I would necessarily add. I don't. I mean, I'm sure it probably goes without saying, just having the ability for like traditional controls and motion controls. Other than that, I don't know, honestly, because even when we used to talk about Metroid Prime Trilogy, the most I ever thought the possibility of having both traditional and motion controls like available from the get-go, right?
Yeah, both.
Because people obviously they prefer one over the other, but every time we've gotten those games, it's always been either the traditional controls or in the Wii's case, it was like the motion edition, right? So I feel like there's gonna be people who prefer one over the other, and if it releases and it doesn't have one of those two play modes, it's gonna be a little disappointing for some. So I would say that's the one major thing that I would want.
Yeah, I definitely think they should have both for sure. But let me check in with the chat here real quick, and then we'll call it a night.
All right.
Let's see here. I got an app from Nintendo Reconnect. Could they release another Master Collection? Because that would be cool. Like you're referring to the Master Collection that came out on GameCube, which I'm trying to remember because there was like a few different things that came out that had the Master Quest and Ocarina of Time, right? Like the two different versions of Ocarina of Time. That was really cool, actually, that they had Master Quest. Ooh, they should add that to Nintendo Switch Online.
Yeah. Maybe fix the emulation first, and then give us Master Quest.
Yeah. It's just interesting that that even exists. I'm like looking up what the package came out with because I don't remember exactly what it had in there. Because was it just because there's like there was a promotional disc that had a few older Zelda games on there too.
I don't remember.
Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition. Yeah, I had Zelda 1, Zelda 2, and I think also Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask.
Okay.
Yeah, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. It'd be nice if they did something like that again, where it's just like a large collection of sorts.
Yeah, I mean, back then, Nintendo didn't have like virtual console offerings, right? So.
Right, yeah.
I don't think they'll do that now. But this was pretty cool back then. Like, it's kind of like 3D All-Stars today, really. I think that's what people wanted for the 35th anniversary this year. Instead, we get Ocarina of Time with glitches. The glitches are, again, like, they don't make the game unplayable. It's just noticeable. Yeah. And Majora's Mask is on the way, so hopefully they patch Ocarina of Time soon.
Yeah.
And Legend of Zelda 1 and 2 are already available on the NES app, and so is A Link to the Past on the SNES app. So there's a fair bit of Zelda already available, and then obviously Link's Awakening Remake on Switch, and then there's obviously Breath of the Wild. So there's the Zelda and all Skyward Sword HD, right? Like there's a lot of the Zeldas are on there, not all of them, but they're getting there. Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, I think Sweet Life of Dio Brando. I like how Master Quest switched up dungeons, right? Master Quest is cool. Like, I'm kind of thinking, like, maybe there should be another Master Quest of something. Like,
yeah, it's always something that I compare, like, other games to.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I remember when Hero Mode was like the major thing, where it was just. I mean, it kind of is still now, I guess.
But like Hero Mode is just like not that crazy because it's not like the animations or the moves change. You just take more damage and there's less hearts, right?
Yeah.
Like it would have been neat if like they did something to make them actually harder. Like what if they could just sped up boss fights a little bit? Like they're like their actual attacks just happen more quickly. Like you have less time to respond. So that way they don't have to like rethink their entire patterns. They just speed it up a little bit. so make it a little harder. But then, you know, with the Master Quest, like, yeah, the Master Quest was actually changing around dungeons. Like, it was basically like new dungeons, but with the same themes almost. Not that significant. Like, if you understood the core concept of a dungeon, you could still handle it. But it would be remixed. Is I guess the best way to put it. So it would throw sort of wrenches at you. It's like, oh, that's not how you solve it now. What do I do? Right? Like, that's cool. So imagine. I mean, the thing now is that. Well, okay, hear me out. What if Breath of the Wild 2 comes out, right? And you know how they added the hero... There was, like, that harder mode for Breath of the Wild. But the dungeons were the same. What if in Breath of the Wild 2, they do come back with traditional dungeons, but they're, like, bigger, because it's Breath of the Wild, you know? So they do that, and then when you beat the game... I don't know if they do it as DLC, or if it's just something they have as a New Game Plus. Like, probably, you know, it would be the other way around, where it'd be DLC. But some way, some shape or form, when you beat the game... You can do a second playthrough. It's hero mode, but hero mode's also a master quest, right? So, what that means is, yeah, enemies have more life. They deal more damage. Life is more sparse to recover yourself. But maybe they also speed them up a little bit, so actually just straight up harder to fight. But also, actually, you know, I mean, if we're talking about that, like maybe give them a few extra attacks too, like just make them a little harder. You know, change around their combat mechanics, but also change around the dungeons, Master Quest style. And then, you know, it feels like a fresh new experience. It's more challenging, and it's like it's a really good reason to play through the game again, right? That'd be really cool.
Yeah, that's definitely what I would want. Like,
yeah,
because every time I've ever seen hero mode, ever since they started putting them into the games, it's always like. I always end up comparing them to Master Quest and wishing that that's what it was instead, you know?
Yeah. Well, Master Quest doesn't make the enemies harder. It's just the dungeons. Like, I wish they just did both.
Right.
But what I'm suggesting is they do... Like, they've never done that where they just make the enemies smarter with more attacks. You know? Like, actually... Like, kind of like, you know, in Monster Hunter, right? Where... The monsters are harder, not because they just deal more damage and have more life, but because they're just more aggressive, right? And they have more attack variation, so they're just kind of harder to deal with because of that. So, like, that would be really cool to see on top of, you know, the hero mode mechanics and Master Quest dungeons. Like, that, all that together would be cool. And they could call it Master Mode. Yeah, implying both. So, you know, I would love to see that. And that's not a remake necessarily, that's just something they could do.
Yeah.
Although, you know, since Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD haven't happened, they were to bring that back, maybe, you know, it's basically like they bring them together as one package and they offer Master Mode, like we're saying, right? Like, that'd be amazing. Do not expect that at all, because that would require a lot of extra work, but I would love it so much. And actually, Twilight Princess would probably benefit the most from that, because the bosses are so cool, but they are so easy that if they actually went back and made the bosses harder with more attack variations, it would just, you know, it would make the game all the better, right? Also more reason for me to replay it with the dungeons actually feeling a little different. But we're just dreaming.
Yeah.
We're just dreaming. I do think someday we'll see Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD, but it kind of just depends on when Nintendo needs to fill up a year with Zelda when they don't have a Zelda game ready. So, we'll see when that happens. But is there anything else you kind of want to add or talk about, Shifty, before we call it a night? You want to talk about your video again? Give us some more details.
Yeah. I mean, if anyone's interested in hearing more detailed thoughts of my own when it comes to Mario Party Superstars, I did upload a video just earlier today. So, you know, if you're interested in checking that out, you know, feel free to go on my channel and take a look.
Yeah, definitely do that, guys. His channel is linked in the description below. But with that, everyone, have a good evening. We will see you soon. Take care. Bye.
See you guys.